Hey there, it's Tandy from Common Ground, Alaska. I am so glad that you've decided to join us today for the class that I taught called Preserving What You Grow, I think is what I decided to call it. I can't remember. We did that class on Saturday morning and it was a lot of fun and we had a lot of good interactions, but I forgot to hit record. So this replay is not an actual exact rendition of the class because which is a bummer because you're going to miss out on some of that fun conversation that was had, but I'm doing my best to try to remember some of the questions that were asked so that we can make sure that we cover everything. So without any further ado, welcome to the Preserving What You Grow or Source Locally, I think is what I actually was kind of going for. Basically, what happens especially in Alaska, especially if you haven't been raised here, is some of our crops that do really well are not necessarily crops that do well in other places, or as in the case of cabbage, you might have I was used to growing cabbage in Oregon. I had nice cabbages in Oregon, but I wasn't used to cabbage. So, so we're going to talk a little bit about that specific to Alaska, kind of some preparation, ways to preserve foods that tend to grow really well up here, and talk about ideas. And also, we're just going to talk about a little bit about building community and um, kind of working towards planting for sustainability. Because I know that that's a lot of the goal of a lot of people who follow our channel. So first of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Tandy from Common Ground, Alaska. We are a teaching farm that feeds Alaskans. We have a teaching component side of the farm, which is we offer classes. Sometimes those are free, sometimes they're paid. It kind of depends on the venue and what type of class it is. And right now we do have some classes that are coming up that I'm pretty excited about. So this Saturday, I think February 17th, is a class on it's on lacto, it's just on fermenting. So we'll talk about lactoferments with vegetables, which is going to be super fun. And we'll get into that a little bit later as to why to ferment. But I want to mention that a lot of people, when I talk about fermenting, they're like, oh, I don't like sauerkraut. Well, guess what? I don't either. I don't like sauerkraut one bit, but I love our lactoferments. They're a lot lighter, they're a lot fresher, they're crisper. And so that's kind of what we're going to learn about, but we're also going to learn about kombucha. It's actually at a kombucha bar. It's at Bear Booch. So that's kind of fun. So you kind of get some behind the scenes information because I know that Troy's going to talk a little bit about making kombucha. We're going to talk about Jun, which is similar to kombucha, only it's made with green tea and honey instead of black tea and sugar. We're going to talk about how to make that. And you get to sample some Jun. I'm going to bring some samples of Jun. And if you're curious about that, you can actually jump onto our video that's called Making Kombucha in Jun. I did do a short class on just how to make those. We're also going to talk about water kefir. We're going to talk about kvass. We're going to talk about milk kefir. So there's tons going on in this fermentation class. So it's 2 hours. It's pretty filled. And I'm going to send you home with some things that are going to help you just get a nice jump start on fermenting. So I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be a little bit hands-on, and we're going to have a good time. So tickets for that can be found on commongroundalaska.com. But that's not the point of this video, is to be a sales pitch. But I did want to let people know that class is coming up. We also have a canning class coming up. We have a gardening class coming up. Carol Hepler is teaching the gardening class. And she's just a teacher at heart. And if you don't follow her, if you're not on any garden pages where she's at, you need to change that because she's just a wealth of knowledge. It's going to be an excellent class. So if you're already a gardener, but maybe want to dig a little deeper, excuse me, then this is the class to be. So we also have the Alaska Homestead Expo coming up, which is, don't even have words. Like, excited doesn't even describe how I feel about this thing. It's definitely a passion project. We've got over 40 workshops for adults. We've got several workshops for kids. Kids get to come for free. It's April 27th and 28th. And it's we're going to have our theme every year. We have a theme. Our theme for this year is animal processing. And so we're actually going to have a 2-day class to teach you how to process your own pork. If you're interested in that, there's going to be a couple of chicken processing demonstrations. There's going to be a couple of rabbit processing demonstrations. It's going to be fabulous. So we definitely, plus just all the other workshops that are coming in, that we tried to kind of cover all aspects of like traditional skills or like the homestead lifestyle. So that's going to be amazing. We have a speaker panel coming in the evening during our ice cream social, which our ice cream social we're getting from Big Dipper. So it's homemade ice cream. So how can you go wrong there? And then we have a speaker panel that's coming that is going to knock your socks off. Seriously, um, there's I can't think of any people that I would rather have than the people who are coming. We have Barb Thomas, who is an original colony kid. Her family, I believe, it was her family that homesteaded the muskox farm. And so she's going to talk about what it was like to be a homesteader back in the day, like when that wasn't just a kind of a fun lifestyle word, but it was actually their way of life. So we're going to talk with her. Josh Smith is going to come and talk about kind of breaking the boundaries, but still embracing your climate. He's just done some amazing propagation projects that are pretty exciting. So, but the fun thing about Josh is he's an energy giver. So when you leave this, when you get done hearing his talk, you're going to be so energized, you're going to feel like you can do anything. And then also with Josh is Jody Anderson, who, if you have not talked to Jody Anderson ever, you are missing out. And talk about an energy giver. Jody is probably Alaska's strongest advocate for agriculture. And she is not afraid to get her hands dirty. Well, literally, she's a soil scientist, right? So, but she just digs in, and she has such also a can-do spirit. And she's just so positive about things. You're just going to love her. So I don't even have words to describe these guys. It's just going to be really great. So grab your tickets to the expo. Okay. The other part of the farm is that we do, we say we feed Alaskans. So we also have, so that's the teaching farm. We feed Alaskans, which would be nursery sales, and our You Pick orchard, which I know a lot of you have come out to pick at. And if not, we'd love to have you this year. We have mostly fruits and berries. We do also commercially grow cantaloupe, but that's not You Pick. We pick them and then you just come pick them up. So, and if you have never eaten a fresh cantaloupe, then I promise you that if you eat one of ours, you'll be ruined for grocery store cantaloupe for life. So that's my promise to you. They're pretty amazing. So, but let's get on with the show, because this is a fun topic to talk about. And I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us. If you're following, if you're watching this on YouTube, I would love to invite you to follow us on YouTube. It doesn't cost you a thing, but it does help us. So I appreciate every little piece of support that our little farm can get, because we're doing it all putting it all together to try and make it work. So okay. We're going to talk about using our produce, preserving our produce, and just all different kind of methods and ways to use what grows well in Alaska or what we can source here locally. Now, I don't know if this has been an issue for you, but it's becoming an increasingly like at first it was just like, oh, that's a bummer. And then it was like, wait a minute, what's going on? And now I feel like my world is surrounded with issues when I go to the grocery store. I'm not slamming the grocery store. We shop there, but I'm getting so tired of not knowing what's in my food. So a couple of examples. I'm on a pretty strict health regimen right now. I kind of wrecked my health when I was younger, not knowing that I was. So, whatever. And so when you turn 50, your body suddenly says, you can't do this anymore. So because of that, my diet is pretty restricted. This was a couple months ago when it felt restricted, but nothing like it does now. But I could have no gluten, no dairy, and no soy. So one of the things that I bought was a rotisserie chicken, and I had a flare, and I couldn't figure out why. Well, rotisserie chicken a lot of times has dairy, and it almost always has soy. So that was a bummer, because that felt like the one safe convenience food. You know what I mean? Like like there aren't, you can't walk down the prepared aisles and feel like you're getting a health food. But I felt like a rotisserie chicken, like it's a whole chicken, it's a whole bird, but it's the seasonings they put in it that make it so amazing. That most have a derivative of dairy and they all have soy. That all of them that I've ever found have soy. So that's a bummer. And traces of gluten. So it was kind of all three. It was a triple whammy. It was a bummer. Um, but then also, so this was a while later. We had been out all day and I was really, really hungry and was getting kind of, well, hangry maybe. So I ran in the store. It was going to be a while before we went home. And so I ran in the store to get some cashews. I thought that would be a pretty, excuse me, I don't know why I keep yawning. That felt like a pretty safe food to get, right? It's a single food. It just should have salt on it, be roasted, salted. So I got a little can of cashews. So we got back in the car and I ate a couple and I asked Abby, I said, would you, just out of curiosity, would you just look at the ingredients on these cashews? And sure enough, these cashews were baked or fried or whatever they do, roasted in soybean oil. Dang. So it just seems like I'm grateful that that was disclosed. I'm grateful that I knew so I didn't eat any more of those cashews. And I just got to spend the afternoon kind of grumpy, kind of grumpy until I could get home and eat. But it seems like if you want pure food products, you're gonna have to grow them yourself or get them from someone that you know, or um, make your own stuff. It's becoming more and more obvious that if you want to know every single ingredient, and especially if you are being careful with your ingredients, then it's getting harder and harder and harder to get things at the store. So for that reason, we are getting more and more, we're trying to grow more and more of our own food. So, and this has been a goal for a long time, partly because it just tastes better, right? And partly because I can buy a pack of seeds for, well, seeds are more than they used to be, but still, you spend $5 on a pack of seeds. And how many, excuse me, I do not know why I'm yawning so much. Please, I apologize. The, a pack of seeds, if you spend $5, say for a pack of squash seeds, well, for one thing, that pack's going to last you for 3 or 4 years because you can only eat so much squash. But think of the amount of squash that you can get just off of, say, 3 plants. You can get a lot of squash off of there. So for $5, that's a pretty cheap way to go about it. So, but then you're left with when you've grown stuff like that, then you're left with, well, what do I do with the extra? That's what we're going to talk about today. So, I'm just going to jump right in first with canning. Canning is my favorite method of food preservation because I really enjoy the whole process. I enjoy seeing my jar. Okay. Excuse me. I enjoy seeing my jars all nice and clean and sterilized on my counter. It's just, there's something about all that beautiful glass sitting there. I love seeing the boxes of, I use Superb canning lids, so I love seeing the boxes of Superb canning lids all lined up, ready to go. All of my rings are ready to go. I love seeing my canner kettles on my stove. Like there's just something beautiful. It's like clothes on the clothesline. Am I the only one that thinks that clothes on the clothesline are beautiful? And I always sort them on there so it looks really nice and organized. Um, so uh so canning is one of my favorites. And then I have a beautiful canning cabinet that Jean and I built this last year that it holds 500 jars. And there are a few things in this life, this worldly life, this side of heaven that make me happier than looking at that, especially in the fall when it's packed full of food that I know is so nutritious and that we've grown or that we've gotten local from people, or even if we've had to bring it in from somewhere else. Like I order from organically grown. Sometimes we bring in peaches and pears from organically grown. And even when I do that, I know that it's organic. I know that it comes from a small farm, and I know that it's from, I you do your best to know your farmer, right? To know the practices. So, it just makes me so happy. So canning is something that you can do with a lot of what you grow. Green beans is an excellent example. I don't like frozen green beans. Frozen green beans kind of get a weird texture, and plus I never have any freezer space anyway. So we can a lot of green beans. I like to can, sometimes you can, well, not sometimes, you can add maybe bacon or onions, or you could add onions and celery and bell pepper to your green beans, and then you've got kind of a little bit of a bigger flavor. So there's all kinds of things that you can add or not. You can throw some ham in there in with your green beans so that you've got, when you open this jar of green beans, you've got like a side dish that's actually super flavorful and good. Um, Tomatoes, we like to can tomatoes. Here's how I go about canning tomatoes. So I have tried a couple times to grow some of the saucing tomatoes, and they do fine, but okay. I just needed coffee today. I'm not a coffee drinker, but clearly I need to take up coffee. So, um, with tomatoes, here's how we go about it. I might grow a couple of heirloom ones of heirloom tomatoes just because it's the right thing to do, right? Like it's good to grow an heirloom tomato, save some seeds from year to year. You're adapting the seeds to your property. That's super important. But for my canning tomatoes for now, I use a variety called Big Beef. It's a hybrid. It's one of the few hybrids that are in my garden, but it just it produces really well. It seems to grow really good in the greenhouse, and we get these massive tomatoes, right? So, and they tend to ripen. We didn't really get many last year, but most years we get so many tomatoes, I don't know what to do with them all. So I grow Big Beef, and that's what I can. That means that I'm growing a juicy tomato, right? So it's more of a juice tomato, not a sauce tomato. It's going to have a lot more juice and a lot less pulp. But oh, does it ever have flavor? That's the other thing. I think they're a lot more flavorful than the saucing tomatoes, which I prefer. So that means that when I can my tomatoes, there's a lot more juice in it. That means when I make my spaghetti sauce, it's juicy. And that means when I make my salsa, it's juicy. So I'm not a big fan of juicy salsa. So what I do is I make up my salsa. It's in a 5 gallon, I have a big 5 gallon pot, and I'll make up my salsa and get it all mixed together. And then I will strain off a lot of that juice. And so it's kind of spicy, seasoned juice. It's not necessarily, it's not salsa because it doesn't have any of the chunks, but it's like, so I just call it, when I write on the lid, I just call it salsa juice. So it's got a little bit of kick to it, but it's not overwhelming. And it's spice and it's flavor. I can that up separately. What I do with the salsa juice is I'll use it in maybe taco. When I make taco meat, I'll pour a little bit in there and then let it kind of evaporate off. But the juice flavors the meat. So when I put my seasoning, I make my own taco seasoning. I don't even make seasoning. I just season it. So I use like cumin and chili powder and salt and all the things, garlic powder, onion powder, and I just kind of put it on the meat. And then I'll put a little bit of that salsa juice in there and cook that off. And that just infuses the meat with so much flavor. You can use it in taco soup. You can use it in chili. It's really good in chili. It flavors up chili so nice. So there's lots of stuff that you can do with that salsa juice that, so you're not wasting and you don't have like juicy salsa. So that's one thing that I do. Also, when I can tomatoes, one of my favorite meals, I grew up eating this. Yes, some of my family is Southern, they're from Texas. And somebody back there is anyway, is macaroni and tomatoes. And so I'd boil my macaroni and then I'd put it in with my tomatoes and eat it, but it was really juicy, right? And more soupy than I prefer. And so I actually just I had a kind of a harebrained idea, and I took my macaroni and poured it in with my tomatoes as I was heating it. So it all got heated up together. Oh my goodness, that was so good. Because the noodles, when instead of taking it the flavor of water, which is nothing, they took up the flavor of those tomatoes. And oh my gosh. So now when I learned that, I was like, well, I'm going to do this forever. So my spaghetti sauce is soupy, and I don't mind. Because when I make spaghetti, I actually boil the noodles in the spaghetti sauce, and up levels the flavor of your spaghetti like you wouldn't believe. So if you're not growing, growing saucing tomatoes, if you're only growing like the slicing or juicing tomatoes, that's one way that you can get around that. Um, let's see. So we also can salmon, chicken, pork, and beef. That's all stuff that we either get locally or grow here. One of my mom's favorite meals, and I've talked about, if you've listened to many of my classes, you probably already heard this, but one of my mom's favorite meals, we called it our fast food. I grew up off grid, and I grew up, well, I was like 40 minutes from the school, and the school was right on the edge of town. So, well, and our town was tiny. Um, so and it wasn't, there's like not a stoplight or anything like that in town. There's a gas station and a little mini deli, and there used to be a mercantile and the school, and the Grange Hall, and that's it. So there's no stoplight, there's no post office. We don't even have a post office. So no library, couple churches, one church, just one church. So our so we were a long ways from actual, like, where you might go to McDonald's or Burger King. Burger King was more well known when I was growing up, at least in Eugene. Burger King was what we would go to. That was like an hour drive. Nobody's driving to Burger King. So my mom had, what our favorite fast food dinner was this. It was venison, typically because my dad was a hunter. But she'd take a pint jar, and at the bottom of it, she'd put some onions and bell peppers and some celery, and then not always celery, but my mom kind of likes celery, but onions and bell peppers always, and then put the cold pack the meat on top, and then she would process that. Now, here's what she'd do. Now I grew up off grid, so I didn't have a toaster. So we'd have to we'd slice our bread, and you put butter on both sides, and you put it on a pan, and you kind of crisp it up on either side. You're toasting it, but you're toasting it with the butter on it. Oh my gosh, it's so good. And then you put this meat that has the bell peppers and the onions on it. So it's kind of like a Philly, because then you're going to sprinkle cheese on top. And so that whole entire meal would take maybe 10 minutes to cook at the very most. It was fast food as it could possibly be. And it's still one of my favorite, 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 favorite meals to eat ever in the history of ever. It is so good. And it's one of the hardest things to give up when I had to give up bread. So that's a way that you can definitely use up some bell peppers and onions. And I tend to, when I can my meat, I don't typically can a lot of meat when we get it, because it's fresh and we're using it. What I actually do is I clean out my freezer first, and all the old meat that's left over. If there's anything that I can do to can that, I often will do that. So I might make some, if I have chicken, then I might make some chicken pot pie filling or some chicken soup, or just canned chicken. We like just plain canned chicken. And then or if there's meat left over, like stew meat or just roasts or whatever, you can can that individually. You can can stew. You can make, I canned sloppy joes, just the filling stuff last year, which is really good. And I also can chili. I'm trying to think of what I did specifically. Oops. My reminder that I have an event coming up in a half hour. So that's what I will do to can our meat. I don't typically can it fresh. I typically can what's been in the freezer for 6 months or so. And that way I'm constantly making sure that nothing gets lost in the freezer and that everything is being used down to the last scrap. So we also can applesauce. We do pear sauce. We do apple, honeyberry, Saskatoon, and cherry pie fillings. I mean, we do all those normal things too. Tons of jam. We don't usually use our jam on toast because most of the bread I make is sourdough, and Jean doesn't really like jam on sourdough, but what we do use our jam for is on homemade yogurt. And I make my homemade yogurt a gallon at a time. So it lasts in the refrigerator for a couple weeks, and Jean and Abby just love it. And they will put jam in the yogurt. That is really good stuff. So there's that. The other thing that I do, and I kind of touched on this a little bit, is I love to have meals in a jar all canned up. So I do, at the end of the year, when you're ready to be done with your garden and you have, you know how you always have, I do anyway, I'll have some leftover stuff. I might have some leftover green beans. I might have some onions left over that I don't like if I have too many that I don't think will last. I oftentimes like sometimes I have like bell peppers, things like that that don't necessarily I don't necessarily need. Then I will take all of them and put them together, and I always have tomatoes. Actually, I do tomatoes on purpose, extra tomatoes on purpose to do this. I'll get out my big 5-gallon pot and I'll throw all that in there and make like a vegetable soup. And I don't put anything in it because you shouldn't can rice or things like that. But so it doesn't have anything in it but the vegetables. But it is an amazing start to a meal. So I can take one of those jars of vegetable soup and I can take a probably 3/4 of a cup maybe of I use jasmine rice. You could add rice to that, and a can of a pint of meat of canned meat that you like if you've canned pork or beef or even chicken. Chicken would be fine, and pour that in there. You've just taken everything off your shelf that is all homegrown. And again, you've made fast food. You've made a soup that is I guess your rice isn't homegrown, sorry, but and you don't have to put rice in there. You can put noodles in there, or you can just leave it brothy, right? But you've just made an incredible soup that is so healthy for your family. And the vegetables were leftover scraps that maybe you wouldn't have had something else to do with them. So that I think that is so fun when you can take what might be considered extra or what you might not specifically have plans for and turn that into food that's incredible. So that covers canning. And if you'd like to learn about canning, again, I do have a canning class coming up that I'm teaching. I want to warn you, I am not a rebel canner. I follow the rules. I'm happy to go into why. You're welcome to email me. But botulism is a real thing. Botulism is scary, and botulism is on the rise in America. And I believe it's because of the rise in people who are not using safe canning practices. So don't ruin it for all of us. Just stay safe. You don't want to make your family sick. So, okay. So the next thing, so if you'd like to join our canning class, I would love to have you on our website, commongroundalaska.com. Go under shop, go under classes, and then you can read all about it. The next method of food preservation that I want to talk about is fermenting. That's my newest form of food preservation. So no, let me take that back. I wasn't a little bit nervous about fermenting. I was terrified to ferment because in canning, you have all these safety practices that you do to know that no one's going to get sick. And fermenting, because I didn't understand it, felt like it was just like a wild free for all. It'll be fine. That's not the case now that I understand the science behind it and I understand how to do it properly and safely. I totally understand that now. But when I first started, it just seemed really scary. I do want to say, I have never thrown away as much food as when I was learning to ferment, which is why I really encourage people to take my class or any class. You don't have to take mine. But there's so much to learn, and there's just those little idiosyncrasy things that you need to know that will help you not have to waste food. It's the learning curve. There is a bit of a learning curve, but it's not hard. It's just knowing all the things. So, again, we'd love to have you in the fermenting class. Okay, here's what's fun about fermenting in Alaska. So I want you to think about this. We have celery, we have radishes, we have cabbage, we have bell peppers, we have onions, we have carrots. Carrots are fairly easy to store. We have kohlrabi, we have jalapeno peppers. And I'm sure I'm missing. We have broccoli, or not broccoli, excuse me, cauliflower. I am sure I'm missing some, but some of those vegetables are a little bit tricky to preserve. Like cabbage, I know some people who will blanch their cabbage and then put it in the freezer. And then after they do that, then when they're ready to eat it, they use it kind of as a side dish, and they might mix like some ham or something in with it. But if you think about the fact that first you're blanching it, so by the time you're done, your cabbage is white for one thing. So you're blanching it, and then you're cooking it again. and it's just losing a lot of its nutrients, which is fine. I'm sure there's still good stuff in it, and it's a great filler, and it's homegrown, and you know it doesn't have anything bad in it, right? So that's fine. I'm not dissing it, but that's also not most people's favorite way or favorite side dish. So cabbage does save for a while, but it doesn't save forever. And you can make sauerkraut, but if you're not super into that really sour flavor, then you might feel kind of stuck. Like, what am I going to do with all these cabbage? And like I said, I was used to growing cabbage in Oregon, not cabbage. And so there's so much. But when I learned to ferment, I will do like 1.5 5-gallon buckets a year, and we eat on that all year long. But here's what I do. I don't ferment my vegetables for a really long time on the counter. They might only sit out for 3 or 4 days, and then they go in the refrigerator to slow that ferment, because we like for the fermented vegetables, but we don't like that overpoweringly strong flavor. There are so many tricks and tips that you can do to make it palatable for you, for your family. And I think that's probably the most important thing for fermenting, is that you don't want to go to all that work and have your family not eat it. But fermenting takes those vegetables, that mix of vegetables that's really good, and it turns it into this dream for your belly. It's so incredible. It like up levels the nutrients and the digestibility, magnitudes. So it's definitely something worth doing. Another thing we like to do, I do a lot of mixed veggies, but I also like to ferment cauliflower. Cauliflower is really nice. I actually 2 years ago I did some fermented cauliflower, and it was curry flavored fermented cauliflower. That was addicting. Oh my gosh, it was so good. It was so good. And we also like to do just plain carrots. Here's the fun thing about carrots. When you do them, if you put a little bit of dill and garlic in them, then as you're eating them, they have to sit in the fridge for a while. And then when you eat them, it's like eating a crunchy dill pickle, only it's a carrot, and they don't get squishy like pickles can. I realize that some of you are pickle mavens and you're able to do a crisp dill pickle. And I just have lost all interest in pickles, making my own. I buy Bubby's. I'm okay with that. That's the one thing that I just do. I just buy Bubby's pickles because I just don't like, I love Bubby's pickles, and I'm not a huge fan of pickles that don't stay crunchy. But carrots do. So this has been like kind of my replacement, is to not pickle, to do carrots, and add the dill and the garlic in there, and it is so good. So good. You should try it. They're a little bit effervescent, but not fizzy, if that makes sense. So another thing that I like to make is kvass with beets. And kvass is a little bit of a different drink, but it's a total gift to your liver. So it's a healing tonic. You can read more about that, but it costs nothing to make. And if it's going to be that helpful to your system, then why not? It doesn't hurt. Even if you don't I don't mind the flavor now. I didn't used to like it very well, but you can add ginger to kvass, or I mean, it's seriously, I'm not even going to go into it. There's tons of stuff you can add to it. I like a lighter flavored kvass, and the lighter colored beets make a lighter flavored kvass. So the darker colored beets tend to make a little bit stronger flavor. And that is, you just take a swig. It's just a tiny little swig. First thing in the morning, major gift for your liver. And we've kind of been so hard on our livers for so long that it's time that we kind of give back a little bit. So, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about with fermenting is drinks. Now, we don't drink soda, but we used to. And I love a good fizzy drink. I don't even like soda anymore. I don't like the flavor of it. I don't know what they've done to it. Soda from this generation or this age is nothing like the soda that I grew up with. But anyway, so what we'll do, I will get out my steam juicer, and all of our extra fruit. And if you have berry bushes, chances are you have extra fruit, unless you're not netting them, and then the birds, especially for honeyberries, the birds will eat them. But Alaska produces so much fruit that you can go and forage for. And then, like I said, if you have any sort of orchard, if you've got leftover fruit, this is the fastest and simplest way to do it. I just will put whatever fruit I have in my steam juicer. You can sweeten it if you want to, right there in the steam juicer, so it gets canned sweetened, or you can sweeten it later. But I'll tell you why we're doing this. So you're making fruit juice to flavor your kombucha and your gin and your water kefir. And here's why. Number one, you're not using juice from the store, right? And so you know what's in it, you know how it's been grown, you know if there's been any chemicals, which chances are there's not. And so, but also it's just a homemade product. Like it tastes better, it's beautiful. And so I have learned, I didn't sweeten it the first year because I thought I didn't want sweetener in all the juice, but everything that we use it for gets sweetened. So at this point in time, I actually do sweeten that juice, and that's what I use to sweeten, or excuse me, to do the second ferment on the gin, to flavor our gin. Gin is similar to kombucha, only it's made with green tea and honey, and it is a much lighter flavor, and it's easier to ferment and make really effervescent. So it's such an incredible drink. It's so good. And you can do cherry, so it's kind of like cherry soda. You can add our favorite, which is crazy because I don't like black currants. I don't like to go out and eat them. I don't like to smell them. I don't like them. But when you cook and make juice out of those black currants and add that to gin, I'm telling you, it's the next $1 million idea. It is so good. You would not even believe how good it is. It's off the charts good. You can use honeyberries, which we just use frozen honeyberries and make a juice that way. Saskatoon doesn't have a lot of flavor, so if I was going to do Saskatoon, I might do something different. We did, I bought at the store, I bought some pear juice, and then I had pineapple juice. So this is obviously not sourced locally, but I did do like a pear pineapple one, and that was, oh my goodness, that was really good too. So, so you don't have to use juices that you do on your own. But again, if you're interested in learning any of that, my fermenting class is coming up this coming Saturday, and we'd love to have you. You can find the link for that at Common Ground Alaska. So another method, the other couple methods to preserve your food are freezing and dehydrating. I want to talk for a second about freezing your food because, so first of all, this is going to sound really silly, and I'm a very ish person. I'm not like organized and regimented. I am not type A at all. As a matter of fact, if there's type A and type B, I'm like a C, D, E, F. I'm way out there. But I love to meal plan. And so when I'm meal planning, I actually think for the year, and I break that down by the month, and then I break that down by the week. And so what I do when I'm planting my garden is I know, this is specific, especially to freezing, but it works for anything that you're doing. I know that I want in my freezer, I want to eat broccoli, say twice a week. So if I want to eat broccoli twice a week, I know that we preserve the heads of the broccoli and we eat the shoots fresh. That's just kind of how we go about it. So if I want to eat it twice a week, then I'm going to have 104 quarts of broccoli in the freezer. Okay. So because I'll just open a quart bag and that's what we'll have as our side dish for dinner. So so we need to have 104 broccoli plants, and I'm going to take those heads and I'm going to freeze them. But let me give you a tip. This is one of my favorite tips of all. I remember I was telling you about my steam juicer that I use to juice my fruit. I use, rather than blanching, when you blanch your vegetables, you take the vegetable and you put it you get the water boiling, you put the vegetable in, it stops boiling, you wait till it comes back up to boiling, which depending on your stove, I just got a new one, so I'm able to do stuff a lot faster now, but it used to take forever. And as soon as you put your broccoli in that boiling water, your water is green and your broccoli is not that pretty anymore. So then you blanch it for 3 minutes, and then you blanch your broccoli for 3 minutes, and then you take it out and it's dripping wet, and I usually put mine on a towel, and it's kind of limp and just not, I don't know, it's fine. But if you have any kind of steam juicer, or you should get one, you can steam your broccoli, and you can do this with cauliflower. You can do this with all your greens. You can steam them instead of blanching them. And here's what happens. Number one, your broccoli turns from the green that it comes out of the garden to like, it just like brightens when it's being steamed. It's so beautiful. It stays a little bit crisp, or yeah, a little bit crisp, and it's not soaking wet. So when you take it out and put it on your towel, it dries fairly quickly. And here's the fun part. You do have to steam for 5 minutes, but your water stays boiling the whole time because you're using the steam basket that's above the boiling water. So every batch goes really, really quickly. You dump your broccoli in, you put the lid on it, you time it for 5 minutes, you dump it, you put your next broccoli in, you're not waiting to heat that water back up. That's one of my best tips that I have is that, and that works for broccoli and cauliflower and greens. So that's my favorite way to preserve them. And we like to freeze our berries. I will tell you, some berries like strawberries and raspberries and a lot of usually currants you do a little differently. Cranberries, usually you have to individually freeze them because they're a softer berry and they kind of get mushy. Honeyberries and Saskatoons, and black currants, you actually don't have to do that. You can actually pick them. They're hardened, they're solid enough, I guess, that you can just pick them. If you pick them really clean, you just pour them right into your freezer bags and put them straight in the freezer. They don't make a clump. They're easy to stay separated. So my mom made something and sent me as a gift. She called it mirepoix. I think that's how you pronounce it. And it was carrot, celery, and onions. And she dehydrated them, ground them up, and it's like this seasoning. And so I will melt butter and put the mirepoix and some salt in there and put it under we grow our own chicken. So I'll roast a chicken and put that butter with the mirepoix and salt under the skin and like butterfly it. And so it's laying flat and it gets kind of crispy in there. Oh my goodness. It's so good. So it takes a lot of carrots and a lot of celery and a lot of, either bell peppers or an onion, and then bell peppers if you want them. But it's so worth it. It's really yummy. So I will say that you can't really dehydrate honeyberries unless you have to at least slice them up once, and you're still looking at like 40 hours. We've had lots of people try to do it and it just didn't work very well. So there's better ways to preserve honeyberries. And then you can make herbs and teas, of course. That's pretty basic. So here's the thing. I prefer to shop from my shelf before I shop from the grocery store. And so the more diverse and full my shelves are, the better off I am and the better off my family is, because we're eating food that I know exactly what's in it. The majority of the time, I know how it was raised, and that's just really important to me. So if you have any questions at all, you're welcome to ask. I'm going to put links in the show notes to the classes and to the Alaska Homestead Expo. And I just hope this was helpful. You can always reach out to me by email or by text. And I just appreciate you watching this. I hope that this helped a lot, and I hope you're inspired to grow an amazing garden this year.